So on this series, this is week 6. The title of it is Reincarnation Beyond the Veil of This Life. And as I said in the very beginning, I'm coming from my beliefs and how I've put this belief together that is so strong in me. But for me, what is so powerful about it is that I've lost completely the number one fear of most humans is the fear of death. And when you realize there is no death, that fear drops away and it completely allows you to live in life fully. And that's part of what today's about. But there's some other part in this very piece of it is what has engaged us in this constant recycling of rebirth, reincarnation, whatever words that you want to use for it. And we're going to talk today about that because that's one thing that you and I have the ability to change. And we can change it in an instant. And I'm going to teach that process that allows us to be able to do that. So we're going to change the back end of today, the way we've been doing some things, to give room for this, because I'm going to go through the teaching of it, and then we're actually going to, as you know, I'm all about experiencing it, feeling it. So you're going to have the opportunity to do that. And I'll say this up front so you have some time as we go through it, because one of the things that you're going to see in this process, and I'm going to turn to Buddha today in a way because he taught something very important that wasn't taught very well by the master teacher Jesus. And so as you're thinking through this talk today, be thinking about a desire that you have, an attachment to something that gets in the way of your connection to the divine. And I'm just giving you that heads up so you have some time to noodle that. What it might be for you that you want to let go of. And it could be an emotional thing, it could be a physical thing, it can be a material thing. And we'll get into that as we go along, but gives you a little heads up to think about before we get there in probably the next 25, 30 minutes. All right? Remember Tuesday night as our second to last in this series. We've been having wonderful Tuesday nights, and we're going to go deeper in this subject. And I'm going to add something back in Tuesday night that I couldn't cover today. So it should be a good class. We continue to ask this question. This is the 6th time I've asked it of you. What if life is a sacred spiritual adventure and not just we come here for 80, 90 years and that's it? What if? How would that change how you see what you do? How would it change the way you approach your life? How would it change you today? And that's part of what we're going into, because next week we move into the ultimate destiny. Why are we here? Again, my belief, not yours. You have to decide. But I believe when we answer the question, why am I here, it begins to change everything that we do in life. And it allows us to begin to look at life as a sacred adventure. So let's talk about this word reincarnation. Another word that you can use is rebirth. Born again. A different way to use that than we have heard. But it means coming back into the physical for another go-round. How does that change the way you approach if you know that you're responsible for everything that you think, feel, believe, and do, and that it will impact the next time you come back? And we're going to look at what are the alternatives to that if you want to believe in something else, right? But the majority of the world believes that this is true. The majority of the world. When it was taken out of Christianity was around 325 AD in the Nicaea Council. For those who were good Catholics early on, or Lutherans or whatever, you did the Nicene Creed, right? Well, that's where that came out of. And that council, when they brought the bishops together and they basically rewrote what was in and what wasn't in the Bible. They took whole books out, they took whole pieces out, and that's how some of this got changed. Because if you match up today what the Bible says and what Jesus says in it and what's being taught about what he says are completely two different things. And reincarnation, and as I'm going to talk about in a minute, was a given back then. And it was, in the Gospels that were taken out, it's talked about a lot. But that was removed. Now there's one section that I'm going to show you today that they missed, which is kind of interesting, because they got all the other ones out. And somehow that one was missed, and I'm not sure why. The major argument in the world against reincarnation, rebirth, comes out of Christianity. And their argument is, well, Jesus didn't teach it directly, so therefore it's not true. I would offer a different explanation. Jesus was an Essene. An Essene was a sect within Judaism that reincarnation was just a fact of life. It was a given. The fact that he didn't teach on it doesn't mean he didn't believe it or didn't believe that it was true, in my opinion. He didn't teach on it because everyone believed it. There was no reason to even talk about it. And if you read any of the Gnostic Gospels, and you read any of the writings of the Essenes, you're going to see reincarnation, rebirth, completely through everything that was taught. But it was removed in 325 and then 450. They got most of it out as they began to make the religion, right, be the political system out of Rome. Roman Catholic Church came from that process. And the Protestants that broke away in the Protestant Reformation took most of the teaching from the Roman Catholic teaching. So you can see how it progressed through that whole Christian thought that has really the only religion that teaches against it of the major religions. So here's a scripture they missed. So you all know who John the Baptist was. He came to baptize Jesus when Jesus was ready to start his mission. And this is what he said. He answered them and said, Elijah is coming and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah already came. So he was a prophet back 5,000 years ago in the Old Testament, part of Judaism. Already came, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wished. So also the Son of Man, which he's talking about himself and Jesus in the moment, not the Christ, Jesus is going to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he had spoken to them about John the Baptist. So this tie-in that John the Baptist was the reincarnation of the Elijah, the prophet, makes sense, and where they were in their spiritual development. But somehow this one got missed, is the reference back to. But I want you to note here that the disciples understood. They said, yeah, we get that. It was part of their belief system. There's no big deal. Okay. John the Baptist came back from Elijah to help get this whole thing set up. Here's some people through history who believed in rebirth or reincarnation. It's a pretty wide list, historically and also belief systems. Pythagoras and Plato and Origen and Nietzsche and Ralph Waldo Emerson and Gibran and Benjamin Franklin and General George Patton and Henry Ford. Now, why did I put this list up? This is a list you don't hear from the side of people who argue against it. And this list could go on and on and on and on, because as I said, the major religions, the major people all over the world, this is just a given. It's not a big thing for them to argue about. Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and in one man in his time plays many parts. Again, a belief that Shakespeare was pointing us back to the whole notion of reincarnation and the whole notion of rebirth. So we can see historically, we can see through many religions, we can see through many cultures how this understanding that we get a second chance, we get a mulligan. Barry. We get a chance to learn and come back and do it again. If we accept these beliefs of karma and reincarnation, it leads to only one place: personal responsibility. I am responsible for what I think, for what I feel, for what I believe, and for how I act. And if you take that and connect it with what we taught, in the Abraham part of the vibrational universe, is what we vibrate to, we bring back. Why? Because we know in physics, like attracts what? Like. And if it was anything else, we would be in violation of the laws of physics. I don't think it would be set up to violate the natural laws either. But what happens as we begin to embrace this, or I'm going to make it personal here, what happened for me is I began to embrace this more and more. The consciousness of victimhood is released. I could no longer blame God. I could no longer blame karma. I could no longer blame destiny, or whatever words you want to put to your victimhood. I have to own my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. And they will vibrate at whatever level they are. We've looked at those graphs many times, and bring back the comeback universe, the boomerang universe brings back whatever you're vibrating to. And as you begin to drop all blame of God, which I had a lot of it at one point in my life, because none of it made sense to me at that time. I was really ticked off that Jesus was special. Really. How did he get to be special? Why was he the exception? If you're an all-loving God, why aren't we all an exception? Why aren't we all special to be able to do and to have everything he did? I was really ticked off. But as I began to understand this teaching and I began to embrace it in my own consciousness, I had to drop that victimhood. That's a victim. I was victim to God. Because he made him special. He didn't make me special. Something wrong with that picture, I thought. What's the alternatives? I could only come up with two. Maybe you have more. One is that there is no afterlife. We live our 80, 90, 100 years here, and then we just go back to dust, and we stop existing. That's the belief that some have. I don't judge their belief. It's sad to me to think that I put in all this work for so far 68 years, and I don't know, thousands of lifetimes, and then I would just disappear in a pile of dust. That is not a very joyful process for me. I don't know if it is for you, but that is an option. You can believe that. The other option is the vicarious atonement, or the substitutionary atonement it's called. It's where someone, something pays the price for my mistakes. And the danger in this belief, because I was taught this, is that it takes you off the hook. It's like, wow, I went in, did confession, God bless, and I can do whatever I want this week for the other 6 days. That doesn't work very well, right? Because you can have that belief and you can go through that process, but I got news for you. The law of attraction is still working, and all you're putting out for those other 6 days is going to right back here and smack you upside the back of your head. I know, I lived it. So did you. But these are the only two other options that I know. And for me, I cannot believe that an all-good, loving God, that I'm the greatest creation ever created, would give me 60, 70, 80, 90 years on this planet to get it right once. And if I didn't get it right, I go to hell for eternity. No, that does not even make sense. And I don't buy that I was born a sinner with a blemish on my soul. That doesn't make sense either. Why would this incredible, loving God create you and me that way? It doesn't create that oak tree with a blemish on its soul, or the leopard over there, or the rabbit over here. Why would he do it to his greatest creation, makes no sense to me. It might for you, it does for a whole lot of people, I get it. But I could not, so the only option I could find out of these three was the one we're talking about today. I mean, this Creator does not give that maple tree one lifetime to make the perfect leaves. They fall off, tree dies, and guess what happens in spring? Abundance. Hundreds and thousands of leaves come back. Well, if that maple tree gets more than 1 year, I will get more than one lifetime in this system. It's the only thing that I could come to. Anyway, this is a little bit on the atonement. This is what's taught. That one special person came, Jesus came to die for your sins, your mistakes. That's called a vicarious substitution. I can't believe it. When I look at Jesus, why would he die for my, I mean, he was 2,000 years ago. What's that got to do with me? So out of that, I could only come to this conclusion. So rebirth answers some also life questions. Deja vu. You've all experienced deja vu. You have friends that have, it's like, wow, I don't know what happened there, but I know that person from somewhere. It's a knowing, you feel it in your system, you feel it in your being. It's like, I don't know what happened here, but I've been here before. Okay? I don't know how else to explain it. If you haven't been there in this lifetime, how would you know that you were there? Unless you were there some other time and you had a memory. What about seeming injustices? What about the child that's born with a birth defect? That doesn't seem fair to me, does it to you? Or what about someone who lives their lives and they're healthy and they're exercising, and all of a sudden they turn the corner one day and they have cancer? Why? If God is all good and all loving and we're all equal, how does that happen? Or someone has an accident, or all these things that happen to us in our lives that seem unjust. It's like, well, this doesn't make any sense. What about the child prodigies? That at 4 and 5 years old sit down on the piano, were never trained in this lifetime and can play Mozart. How did that happen? If that child was not here before, or many lifetimes maybe practicing piano before they got here. I don't know any other way to explain it, because a normal 5-year-old does not sit down at a piano without lessons and do Mozart. Doesn't happen. But we've seen child prodigies in all areas. We're seeing more and more, actually, all the time. It used to be very, very rare, but not anymore. And I think that's because of the children coming. Or what about past life memories? You know people or you have them. How do you explain that? If there wasn't a process of rebirth, of reincarnation. One explanation could be, well, I have a vivid memory or imagination. Really? So, as you know, I like to go to the scientists, and I'm going to look at them in a minute. But reincarnation for me and rebirth eliminates the seeming contradiction between an all-good, loving God and the bad negativity stuff that happens on earth. If you take God out of that equation, which a lot of people want to blame him, I mean, we've seen religions for a long time. If there's a natural disaster comes in, well, God's wrath is punishing you. Well, there's a whole lot of really good people who got punished in that flood, or in that hurricane, or that tornado. That doesn't hang either for me. So as I begin to look at it, it's the only way I can begin to, because I do have that belief system that it's all good God, and we're all created equal, and that we're all loved unconditionally. And the only way I can begin to make sense out of what I see happening in the world is connecting it back to karma and reincarnation. I don't know any other way. And if you have ways, that's good. You know, good for you. But I wasn't able to find any other way that made sense to me. But through our free will and our choices, we have used the light of the universe, the life force, the chi, the key, whatever you want to call it, And we created out of our choices the current circumstances in our lives. That's the whole rebound. That's the whole vibrational universe that we bring back what we would vibrate to. Now, I will also say, as a coach, I have worked with people, and I won't say much to them, but I watch the struggles they're going through in their current life, and I'm like, you brought some of that stuff with you. Because when you go through their life history, there isn't that much negativity to warrant what they're going through. So I believe we can also bring some stuff with us from past lives. And if you believe that our soul comes here to work out these lessons, to learn how to become more of the light, then it all makes sense that we get another chance. And that becomes what I call the divine plan when we come back. That's exciting news for me. Because it means you and I have control. If we created it, we can change it. If we didn't create it, and it's some being outside of me, God, or some negative source outside of me, creates this, then I'm a victim. I might as well throw up my hands and just say, I'm out of here. Why would I want to continue if I didn't have any way to be able to affect what goes on in my life, going not only in this lifetime, but forward? And as you begin to embrace that incredible power of personal responsibility, it begins to get more and more exciting. At first, I grant it can be overwhelming. Because we have all been well-trained and domesticated into victimhood, have we not? Religion, education, parents, friends, relationships. That's the go-to for all of us. And as we begin to make that change into owning it, it becomes really, really exciting, because if that's true, then anything is possible for you and me. I always loved this, they call it chambered nautilus. And for me, it's how I see life. As that grows, it grows a bigger chamber. And that's how you begin to get that spiral in that nautilus. I see my life and I see your life that way. We come, we grow, we do the best we know how, we get better at some things, and all of a sudden our chamber gets bigger. The next time we come around, it gets bigger, and it gets bigger. And I just love the symbolism of that chambered nautilus. By the way, for you, those of you who are into numbers, that's the perfect Fibonacci ratio that builds. But I believe it's also the perfect ratio that builds your life and mine. There's an order. God, the creator, the source, is God, the creator, source of order, not a disorder. Disorder is of human ego. So what do the scientists say about rebirth and reincarnation? I'm going to give you a list here and some books for some of you I know like to go deeper in some of these subjects. These are all doctors who have done all kinds of hypnosis into past life. Dr. Alexander Cannon, it's called The Power Within. Helen Wambach did Life Before Life. The one that I find most intriguing is Dr. Ian Stevenson. Now, his number is much higher now. But it studied 2,500 children. And he'd done hypnosis and past life regression. These children were so young, a lot of them, that they didn't have time to be domesticated into a religion. They just came back with memories. And he was able to work with them and take them back. And it was what he was so intrigued with, because every one of those scientists started from this premise. I don't believe in reincarnation, and I'm set out to prove it wrong. That was their thesis. And everyone, after seeing all this evidence of working with so many people, began to write books about how it had to be. So don't just listen to me, just don't listen to spiritual, look what the scientists have found and done. But Dr. Ian Stevenson is one I think you'll enjoy. The 2,500 children, some of the things, but what we've done is summarize some of the things of what they found out. Karma is a teacher who spans many lifetimes. They saw this pattern over and over again, exactly what we were talking about last week. If we fail a test, the lesson is repeated. Does that not take some pressure off? All of you out there think you got to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You just do your best. In this moment in time, what's coming to me is my lesson to be worked on, and I'm going to do the best that I can. That's all I get to do. And my chamber continues to grow. Physical life is the best opportunity for the soul to advance. I love that coming out of the scientist, don't you? Coming to the physical world is the best way your soul can advance. It's the best way it can grow, is by being here and doing these lessons. Talents are progressively developed. This is how I believe we get child prodigies. Lifetime after lifetime practicing the piano, and they come at 5 years old and can do Mozart perfectly. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Otherwise, that child is an exception. Just like I was upset because Jesus was made one. There's no exceptions in the plan. There are just people who have done the work and are further along in the process, who have grown more chambers and they're knotless. I love that this came back, because this is what I teach, as you know by now. This came from the scientists. 2 of the biggest life lessons is learning how to love and receive love, and learning how to forgive. Science, spirituality, becoming one in 2021. A life review with loving counselors guide the creation of your next life's plan, but we always make our own decisions. Now, in this teaching that we're going through, it's called the Karmic Board. There's anywhere up to 8 ascended masters that meet with us and sit down and go over this life. What worked, what didn't, what did we learn, and make a plan for the next one. They found the same ideas coming out of all the scientific research into the past lives and the hypnosis of what was going on. So I talked about this earlier a couple of weeks ago about getting connected with your life plan, getting connected with the divine plan that you have. You are here for a reason, I believe. And the sooner you know what that reason is, you can begin to embrace it and move towards it, so you don't have to come back and just repeat this same lesson. That's why I think it's so important to know what it is. I have a couple of my coaching clients say, well, how do I find out? This is real. You're going to want to write this down in your notes. Ask. Remember the teaching? Ask, believe you'll receive, you will. Ask what your divine plan is. They're waiting to tell you. And you're like, no, I got this figured out. I know how to do this. No, that's the hard way. That's the way to make sure you get to come back and do it all over again. You don't have to. None of us do. But if you begin to ask, what is my divine lesson? What is my life plan for this life? And you can begin to align up and align your energy with that. You will not come back. Your chamber will grow and your knotless will get bigger. I showed this last week, karma is a boomerang, but the boomerang, I believe, carries through to the next lifetime, and the next, and the next, and the next, until we learn the lesson. That's exciting. I don't have to be perfect. I can just do my best, and I can find out what the life plan is and try to stay on path the best that I can. And then you already saw from the scientists, there's 2 things that we're all here to learn to do. 2 things. And it completely aligns with what Jesus taught, what Buddha taught, what Lao Tzu taught, what Sankara taught, and all the great spiritual teachers. The 2 things that scientists found from the study of children is we're here for 2 things. Learn to forgive ourselves and everyone else and God, and learn to love ourselves. That's it, folks. That's the divine plan. Now, I think there's little things in there that add to my special and your lessons, but those are the 2 major lessons that you and I are here for. And we will keep coming back and keep coming back, because all you have to do is look around you and see nobody's getting this lesson. Right? We're not seeing massive forgiveness and unconditional love. It's so much out there, I just can't take it all. It ain't happening, folks. So I'm telling you, most of the people are coming back. You don't want to do that, do you? I don't. But you say, well, I'm confused. I can't figure out what my life lesson is. We'll start with those two. And you'll be guided to what else is there. So I'm going to shift now to the number one thing that brings you and I back. And I said it early on to start thinking about this. And this is a better teaching that came out of Buddha than actually Jesus taught about. And it's inordinate desires, grasping or attached desires. Something that you have to have in your life. Right? It's a major reason for coming back and needing to repeat till we learn to disassociate, to detach from. And only you know what that attachment is. But whenever you hear yourself, and I need that, I want that, I can't live without that, you are going down the path of inordinate desires or attached desires. And as Buddha said, it leads to all the suffering of the humans. And everyone's different in how, this is the major lesson of why, beyond the two, but oftentimes it's part of those two. But this is one thing we're learning to detach from. Okay? Inordinate desires. This might be hard for you to see, but and you can Google this and you can find it on YouTube. Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. And most of it is about how life is suffering. And life, he says, and I believe is true, we suffer when we become attached to the outcomes. Right? If you have a relationship with someone and have an expectation of what that's going to look like, and that falls short, that creates suffering. That's an attachment. It can be emotional attachment, it can be mental attachment, it can be physical. But as you work through this, all of us have things that we hold like that. And there are things, because of the inordinate desire, that get in the way of our being in the flow with the Creator, with the Divine. And that's what and again, here's the, very complex way to find out. Ask. Get quiet with yourself. What do I do emotionally? What do I do mentally? What's out there that I'm attached to, that I'm spending way too much time on, that's taken me away from the connection with the life force, with the divine within me? It could be a relationship. Well, I think I have a slide coming up here. So Buddhism teaches that excessive desires and passions are what cause people to reincarnate again and again and again. And until we learn to release from those, we will keep coming back, is the belief. And I can see it in my own life. There's things that show up that I have to work on. And they keep showing up, and it's like, okay, this is something I need to pay attention to. Until a person is free of attachments, they will not be free of the wheel of rebirth. That's what Buddhism teaches. And for me, it hangs true. It just makes sense. We keep coming back and keep coming back until we build ourselves to the place where we can release these things and be in the flow. That's why one of the decrees we've been doing talks about the middle way. That's what Buddha was teaching about. Do not be attached left and right, good and bad. Stay in the middle way and begin to appreciate how life unfolds to you. Acceptance and appreciation leads to love. Loving life, loving yourself is too big of a jump. But as we begin to accept ourselves, begin to appreciate ourselves, it leads us to loving ourselves even more. So out of this chapter came two ways to overcome inordinate desires. And the first one was this: make God consciousness your first priority. Master Teacher Jesus taught it away. He said, seek first the kingdom, right? And all things will be added to you. What is the kingdom of God? Consciousness of God. Where is it? It's inside you. It's one with who you are. But what they're teaching here, and I believe is true, is go there first. And it will help you get detached from whatever that inordinate desire that runs your life. And the second one is to give the violet flame decrees, and we're going to do one today that talks about releasing all desires. And we're going to actually turn it more into a prayer than a decree. These are two ways to do that you have available. And as you begin to do that, you begin to see the attachments that may be out there. So this is again coming from me. Without an understanding of reincarnation or rebirth, it is very difficult to understand your soul's evolution back to oneness with the I Am Presence or the Ascension. In my opinion, it's the very reason for my being here, for me. To come back to wholeness, to the I Am Presence. And as we learn the lessons, as we release the karma, and we're getting more and more tools in our toolbox, spiritual toolbox, to be able to do that, that becomes the ultimate goal for your life while you're here. And next week we're going to talk about that. What's your ultimate destiny? Why are we here? I love this picture because this is how I see it. In this figure 8 connected with the I Am Presence, the Christ Self or the Buddha nature is the nexus of the figure 8, and then you and I are down at the bottom. And that energy, because we know that all energy in the universe spirals, and this is moving to a spiraling energy versus just lateral energy. And we'll be doing some work on this on Tuesday night where we really get connected with how this spirals through our being, but also connects us with the higher I Am Presence. And as that collapses eventually into oneness is what the ultimate destiny is all about. So that's next week's stuff. But don't worry. If you don't believe in reincarnation, you'll get a second chance. You get to come back and try it again. So I'm going to take you through the process. I'm going to go through the slides, and then we're going to come back and turn this into our meditation. So as you've been thinking through the talk about something you want to release, that's what this meditation's all about. And I'm going to take you through how we do that. So you start by looking, and this was suggestions made in the book, and it's a good place to start. Attachments can be around money, can be around food, sex, power, fame, good looks, popularity, and put whatever else in there works for you. But that's where you want to go and say, where am I attached to? Where am I? If I don't have that, I won't be whole. It ain't true. You're already whole. So you can't be looking for anything outside of yourself. But that's what our ego does. It separates from our wholeness, and it's like, well, something out there. If I don't have that relationship, I'm not going to make it. You're into attachment. Or if I don't get this job, or if I don't have that, if I don't get the latest Tesla, I just didn't make it in life. That's probably an inordinate desire and an attachment that needs to be looked at, right? So as you're thinking through those, just come up with one so you have something to work through as we go through the process. So the opening will be this: Beloved, I am Presence, Christ Self. Please free me from the attachments of the desires that separate me from life force, from good, from love, especially, and this is where you'll plug in yours, whatever that is. And then we're going to do the tuba-like decree, but we're going to do it as a prayer. We're going to do it one time through, softly, as a prayer. And what's so powerful about using this, as we get into the second segment, you can say, I am calling forth the violet fire to blaze and transmute all desire. And so as you have laid forth that desire that you want to be released from, this begins that process. And we go on from there. And then we'll end up, and this is what you want to see. If you can visualize or feel it, in that tube of light inside of you and around you and outside of you, that desire just being transmuted, burned up, released, gone. And then we'll come back and we'll end with this prayer. Beloved, I am Presence and Holy Christ Self. Help me to always be in tune with your consciousness and to constantly move toward union with you. Free me from all wrong desires and replace them with the desire for the divine according to God's will, let it be done. Om. Okay? So that's going to be our meditation today and our prayer to release inordinate desires that we have in our lives. All right? So we'll go back to the very beginning.